Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Delta Airlines Flight 2998, bound for Atlanta, Georgia, with continued service to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. All carry-on items should now be stowed securely, either in an overhead bin or under the seat.
It was the summer of 2011, and at the time of this story, I was around 15 years old. For reference, I'm a female, and this was possibly the most horrifying experience of my life. My family and I had planned a trip to New York to go visit my grandparents. I've always looked up to my grandparents as they were always there for us when we needed it. On top of that, with them living in a big city like New York, there were many more activities for the family and I to do, which I saw as a plus. My parents had booked a flight on a late Monday night to save money, as this was around the time flights were starting to get more expensive. I remember us arriving to the airport with our carry-ons in the security section where they make you take out your bags on that rack and go through those big scanners you see in airports. As we're in the line waiting to go through, I notice a man from the other lane staring at me. By the looks of it, he seemed to be alone and didn't appear to have any luggage other than those small drawstring bags. At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, lots of people travel with limited belongings, but I got a weird vibe from him. By that point, we make it past the scanners while TSA is telling everyone to take off their shoes and to get the electronics out. It's about 11:45 at night, and we had until 12 before our plane started boarding passengers. We arrive at the gate and sit down waiting for our group to be called so that we could get on. However, after stupidly drinking tons of juice, I had told my parents that I had to go to the restroom and then I'd be back. They were rightfully annoyed, but said it could go, but to hurry. I walked to the restroom area and into one of the stalls to do my business. Now, the gate we were at didn't have many people as there was only one flight and the other gates surrounding us had no people at all. Given that it was a Monday, you can expect airports to be dead. So there I am, on my phone playing a few games when I hear the bathroom door open and someone step in. I dismissed it as someone else and began to mind my own business when I look up and thought I could see something through the crack of the stall door. It only took me a good second to realize that the thing I was looking at was an eye. The very second I saw it, I screamed at the top of my lungs, pulling up my pants and kicking the door open, pushing whoever it was to the ground. But once I saw who this person was, the anger in my body was beyond boiling. It was the same man from the terminal. I ended up delivering 4 blows to the man's head while screaming out in anger. To be honest, I didn't even know I was capable of doing that. Airport security had come into the bathroom, and once they saw what was happening, they took him away and escorted him out of the building with police. My parents were obviously upset with the situation, which created a big commotion, causing our flight to get delayed. The airport apologized to my family for what had happened and that security would be tightened. How he got past the gate is unknown, and according to police, he had also been carrying a 2-inch pocket knife. In the US, it's extremely rare for someone to get past the gate, especially with a weapon. What I do know is that he clearly didn't have good intentions and that he had planned all of this out. I'm not sure where that man is now, but I'd like to think that he's either in jail or is getting the help he needs. This just goes to show you that nowhere is safe nowadays, especially for women. My name is Maria, and this happened when I was 14 years old. At the time, my parents had just gone through a divorce for reasons I won't go into, but long story short, life was stressful. I stayed with my mom in LA at the time, while my dad had lived in Savannah, Georgia. It's been well over a year where I hadn't seen my dad, and after explaining this to my mom, she had agreed to buy me a plane ticket to go see him. The thing was that I would be flying alone, which for any child is a scary experience. However, my parents thought of me as both brave and responsible, as I've shown significant maturity throughout the years, which is why they let me fly alone. Now, whenever a minor is flying solo, it's an additional $300 fee, which meant big money for the airline industry. I know, it's stupid, but hey, that's how they made their money. I remember my mom dropping me off at the gate, putting my safety into the hands of American Airlines before finally leaving. Even though I was 14, I was still smart enough to know what I was doing and where to go on the plane. I'd say the plane was starting to board people pretty quickly, and it eventually came to a point where I got on and was greeted to the flight attendants. I go across the row of the plane, clutching my bag, and sit in my assigned seat for my ticket. Not even 30 seconds later, a middle-aged man approaches my row and takes a look at his ticket and sits down next to me. After everyone was seated, the pilot had made the announcement that we were cleared for takeoff and to switch our devices to airplane mode. Throughout most of the flight, everything seemed to be okay. But what happened to me at 30,000 feet is something that will never leave me. If I recall, I was playing a game on my iPad when the man sitting next to me had said something along the lines of, "Hey there. What you playing?" I tell him the name of it very briefly, as I knew never to talk to strangers and was aware of what could happen. There was a long pause before he turns his head to me and starts full-on groping me while saying the following. "Well, that's pretty neat. You should show me how to play." At this point, I'm in complete shock as I couldn't believe this was happening to me. He continues to do this for a good 10 seconds before I begin to cry. Thankfully, a nearby flight attendant saw what was happening and abruptly told him to get up and to go to the front of the plane. She sits down next to me for the remainder of the flight and comforts me until we landed. When we did, the first person off the plane was the guy who was sitting next to me where police were waiting. He was thankfully arrested and charged with sexual contact. After that incident, both my parents had agreed that I wouldn't be able to fly solo until I turned 16. Overall, it was a very scary experience as you see this stuff happen on TV, thinking it won't happen to you, until it actually does. This took place in the summer of 2016 when I was on vacation. My family and I were taking a trip down to Miami, Florida to stay with our extended family that lives by the beach. Now, we were originally from Minnesota, and there aren't many good beaches there, so Florida would be a nice getaway. We arrived at the airport at around 6, and our flight was around 8 p.m., so we'd have some free time to hang around before we started boarding. My sister and I had wandered off to the food court to grab something to eat. We ended up choosing Chick-fil-A, which is the closest thing to kids' food. I was 13 at the time, and my sister was 8, so I knew this was one of those times I'd have to be the big brother. We order our food with the $20 our mom had given us and sat down to eat while playing Pokemon cards. I know nowadays the era of playing Pokemon cards was over, but it was one of our favorite card games thanks to our cousins being early 2000s kids. After all, they were the ones who showed us how to play, and ever since then we got hooked to it. We both play a few rounds while eating our food when my sister says that she's going to the restroom. Being the big brother I was, I told her to go and that I'd be waiting for her. So she goes, and I'm still at the food court eating my food as fast as I could as our flight was boarding the first group. Because of this, I had to go tell her to hurry up, and as I'm walking towards the women's restroom, I look to my left. My sister is now outside of the restroom talking to a man I had never seen before. The man had been kneeling down to her height, assuming to listen to whatever she was saying. I then see this man grab her hand and practically tug her when she was clearly uncomfortable. Now, I'm a 5'6" male and don't have a lot of build. This guy was almost twice my height, so I couldn't have taken him on even if I tried. But with this happening in a public place, I figured someone like airport security would put a stop to it. I built up the courage to walk over to them and say the following words to my sister. "Hey, there you are. We're leaving now, so we gotta get going." The man immediately lets go as I, quote, thank him for watching over her. He just stands there not doing anything as he sees me take my sister and leave. We make it back to the gate just in time to start boarding with our luggage. Now, I didn't want to tell my mom about what had happened until we landed, fearing she'd have a panic attack mid-flight. The security at this airport was strict and would kick you off the plane for the smallest reason, even if the sky is blue. We landed in Miami safely and didn't see that man when we returned. I'm 100% certain that I saved my sister from something potentially horrible happening to her. Around 8 years ago, something happened to my mom while on a plane for a business trip. At the time of this story, she had worked as a coordinator and would oftentimes have to fly in and out of the States for certain events and stuff like that. On this trip, she had been going to DC for a convention with all of the expenses paid for by her work, of course. My mom had left for the airport around 1 p.m. and only had an hour to catch her flight. She gets on the plane, and upon an hour after takeoff, my mom suddenly gets this weird feeling. At the time, she didn't know why or how she got this feeling, but it was there. According to my mom, it was a feeling of fear and anxiety, as if it was a sign telling her something was about to happen. At first, she thought that it could have been her fear of flights, but my mom takes medication for that, so she knew that couldn't have been it. As she was about to stand up to ask a flight attendant for something, the plane's engine suddenly blew, causing the plane to rock. At that point, everyone inside the plane began to scream while the pilot came on and made the announcement that they had to make an emergency landing. Thankfully, the turbine that blew didn't cause enough damage for the plane to go down, so everyone remained calm. However, the only problem was that they couldn't be in the air for long as there were parts of the engine that had been ripping off. The plane eventually did make an emergency landing with the engine nearly torn off. During the incident, my mom was able to snap a picture of what the engine looked like from her window. The photo is on screen now. As you can see, the engine is completely damaged to the point where you could even see flames coming from it. Till this day, I'm still thankful my mom is still alive and well. If that plane couldn't have made an emergency landing, God only knows what would have happened to her and the rest of her passengers.